over 30, they qualify for weight management with Wegovy.
So some people may tend to think that these drugs can replace diet or exercise. We know that's a bad assumption. Explain why.
So, the basis of weight management is diet and exercise, and you have to improve your entire health in terms of inflammation reduction, which is one of the pathways in which this study, we're not sure how it reduces cardiac risk, but one of the thoughts is it reduces inflammation, and diet can help with that as well as maintaining the weight loss afterwards. Exercise has a variety of other benefits, which you will hear later in the segment in terms of decreased Alzheimer's risk in patients with obesity. And so it's important that we pair the two together. It is not a magical, drug that I talk about in my weight loss program. It's not something that we give you and it's going to work independently. You have to supplement with diet and exercise.
So, of course, we hear stories about supply struggling to keep up with the demand. So will this new indication make Wegovy even harder to find now?
Yes, I do think, unfortunately, that is going to be the case. We're struggling right now with we'll find small supply and then we can't continue the drug because the next dose up is not available. And I think now that this cardiac indication has been, established by the FDA, I think I am already seeing it. In fact, cardiovascular physicians prescribing it independent of pairing with weight loss. And so I think it's just going to be a supply and demand sort of issue.
So before we let you go, any safety tips for someone who decides to go through a compound pharmacy?
Yes, unfortunately, because it's not available in its, labeled form Wegovy, some patients are going to these pharmacies that are compounding, and the problem is that you can't establish whether you're actually getting the drug semaglutide, number one, so it may not be the drug itself. So you have to make sure that that is, verified, because there's no oversight in these compounding, pharmacies. So you also don't know if it's pure, so meaning it could have other impurities that could cause other complications with your health. So make sure that the pharmacy itself has been, approved by some oversighting agency. So those are the concerns that I have is what else is that drug being paired with, and what are going to be the long-term effects in these compounding pharmacies?
Dr. Finkel, always great to have your insight. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Have a good day.
You bet. You too. Well, let's turn to our guest this morning. Dr. Jeff Burns is a neurologist specialized in memory care, and he is the co-director of the University of Kansas Alzheimer's Disease Research Center. Here in studio with us, we have Dr. Paige Geiger, a physiologist and Alzheimer's researcher, as well as a professor at KUMC. And we are also joined by Mary Catherine Newman right here next to me. I'm going to call her MC today. She said I could, right?
Absolutely.
That's what she goes by for short. So she's also an intern at the Alzheimer's Disease Research Center. So we're going to hear why dementia is so personal to both of these two ladies here this morning. But the number one question we get when we talk about Alzheimer's is what's the difference between Alzheimer's and dementia? We've heard Dr. Burns explain in the past the difference. But Dr. Geiger, I want to hear from you. How do you explain the difference?
So dementia is a broad term used to define the symptoms that are attributed to a broad range of conditions that are characterized by changes in memory, behavior, and thinking that impact daily life. And so Alzheimer's disease is the most prevalent of those forms of dementia and affects about 60 to 80% of the total dementia cases. But within that broad umbrella of dementia, you also have conditions like Parkinson's disease, vascular dementia, dementia with Lewy bodies as well.
So, MC, your mom was diagnosed, but not with Alzheimer's. It was dementia with Lewy bodies, as Dr. Geiger mentioned. What was she like before the diagnosis?
So, Mom, early years, she was a dedicated wife and mother. She is still with us, and she was volunteer extraordinaire. She was
I think we had some photos of Mom. I think we're trying to pull
yes,
up. So
perfect.
This is Mom back in the day, which
yes.
Mom having fun like she should.
Yes, so that's on a trip with Dad, but the family would also call her the spark plug. She was always going to be the person that came up with the ideas for the parties, gathering people together for reunions, just very active. And, I would say prior to her diagnosis, her world just got a little bit smaller, just by virtue of physical needs and cognitive challenges.
So we see some photos now of today. How did you first notice those cognitive changes, Mom?
I would say just kind of those things that make you maybe look across the room at your sister, like, did that one check out with you? Or, you know, but it was a gradual decline for her. It wasn't a sudden drop off or anything
Which
like
is
that.
hard to tell. You know, you're relying on other people who know her well to notice the things you're noticing.
Yes.
How were you all handling this with Mom, and how was she handling it?
I would say in the early onset, we were all just kind of shifting and kind of adjusting, and Mom seemed fine. And then I would say as things progressed, obviously we knew that it was time to pull in some other resources and ask for help.
So give us a timeline of how long from when you first noticed those small changes to when you eventually had to put Mom in memory care.
So small changes started around 2016. Mom was seen at the memory clinic here at KU in 2021, which is when she received her diagnosis. And I would say challenges that many of us felt throughout the pandemic kind of pushed the need for her to get memory care support. And for us as a family too. I think when a family, you know, realizes that they can no longer meet the day in and day out needs, then you need to pull in some resources, and that's what we needed to do.
And it's a tough decision. We hear that a lot. It's a tough decision to go to memory care, but you need it. What was the hardest challenge for you, for your siblings during this time?
I think that there are two pieces that are the biggest challenges and hardships that families or individuals can face. And I think one of them is resources, which is why I'm super grateful that, you know, I went beyond the "I'm fine" response to my friend when she asked how things were going, and she's the one who introduced me to KU's resources, the Memory Clinic, the Cognitive Care Network. It's a team of social workers and a nurse who help families navigate this hardship, and so starting those conversations early and regularly, our social worker was able to help us track Mom's progression and really assist us when it was time to make that transition. And then secondly, I would say that one of the biggest challenges can be the grief component that families and individuals can experience as a spouse, as children, as family and friends when you see things change, and how to navigate that. And that again is an important opportunity to reach out to resources.
It's tough to watch parents age in general and watch them change, but when you have this added diagnosis, it's a really confusing time. So you were able to find support, which was great, but you also started your own support group, Common Ground. So kind of a nice little coffee pun there.
Yes.
When did you start that? What's it like, and what's its purpose?
Well, it just started. So
okay, good. Well, what are we up for?
This is part of a capstone project for my graduate studies in social work. I'm at KU Edwards, and I reached out to Price Chopper, and the Cosentino family has been wonderful about saying, yeah, sure, let's give it a go. And I think it can be, support groups are maybe not for everybody, one-on-one therapy may not be for everybody, but everybody needs to get groceries. Everybody who is in this role, by and large, is confined by people that they can pull in to help them, to be with their loved one. Maybe their loved one is going to the grocery store with them. So I will just be at the Price Chopper at 95th and Mission from 9 to 10 on Wednesdays and just grab a cup of coffee at the Starbucks there. And really, I'm just trying to create community and meet people where they are.
Yeah, offer your support.
Yep.
And show them that they are certainly not alone.
That's right.
Dr. Geiger, also another proof that you're not alone in this, because your research has a personal connection as well. You told us your mom lived with dementia as well. Do you see some parallels here with what MC is saying? What kind of experiences did you have with your mom?
Yes, absolutely. Very similar. My mother also is still living, and we're fortunate to live close by, and so she comes to the memory clinic here at the KU ADRC as well. And yeah, we had a very supportive system within the family of communication and talking about these things, and we feel very fortunate that we can utilize the resources of the Alzheimer's Center. And yeah, my mom's fortunate that she has had a slow progression. She still lives at home with my father. They're getting ready to celebrate their 57th wedding anniversary.
Nice.
She loves going to all the grandkids' sports and games and things, and so it's been a slow progression, and I think one of the hardest things that we deal with is kind of these transition stages that come up as you progress through the disease and sort of knowing what's coming. It's very important to anticipate whether it's safety or medical changes, things like that, especially when you're still living in the home. And so again, I think the resources that are available in the community and talking to other people that are going through these caregiving experiences is really such a good idea for anyone, any families dealing with this.
Thank you for sharing that, your personal side to the research that you do. There are new Alzheimer's drugs that slow down disease progression. And Dr. Burns, you're going to have to help me with names this morning. You know I don't like big words on a Monday, but I got Leqembi. This got FDA approval, but now the FDA is pumping the brakes on a similar drug. It's different, but it's similar. Donanemab. Did I get that?
Donanemab.
Yes. Okay.
Yep.
All right.
And
So
we'll come out with a fancy new name for it when it's
wait.
approved.
Not please say it's not going to be more difficult. Hopefully, it's smaller.
Should be easier.
So tell us a little bit more about that drug. How it's different. How it's the same.
Yeah. So these are two new drugs which I think show it's a really hopeful time in the fight against Alzheimer's disease. The one, Leqembi, was approved about 8 months ago by the FDA, and this other one, Donanemab, has been sort of in the queue for approval for a little while. We've been expecting approval for the last 3 months, and the FDA's we're not sure what's leading to the slowdown, but the FDA is taking its time, probably because of, if you pay attention to the news on this, there was a drug called aducanumab that was approved a couple of years ago, and there was a lot of controversy around it. So I think the FDA may be taking its time on this donanemab. I think everybody in the field expects it to be approved, at some point. So soon we will have two drugs, and both drugs are similar. They both go after amyloid buildup in the brain, and they pull that amyloid out of the brain, and the effect of that is on average about a 30% slowing of decline. So it's not a cure, and there are some risks that we have to be real careful about and select the right patients and pay attention to those risks. But it's a big step forward.
So it's been 8 months since Leqembi's approval. So how many patients are you treating? How are they responding?
Yeah, so as I said, it's a little hard to choose the right patients. So it's something we've been doing in our research program for a while. So, and then it's also a little hard to monitor. So it's not something that, say, if somebody isn't really tuned into this, they're not going to be, a doctor's probably not going to be too excited about figuring out how to do all that. So what we've done is started something we call our treatment clinic, our anti-amyloid treatment clinic. It's one of the first in the country that's really specialized to work through, is it right for the patient, and then begin the treatment and then do the monitoring over time. And we try to do that on behalf of the docs that refer to us to that program. And so we've seen about 150 patients for that program since we started it probably 5 months ago. We're kind of ramping up still. About somewhere between 30 and 40 patients are treated right now. Probably another 30 to 40 are in the queue to getting evaluated, and then it's not for everybody, and so the others either decided not to pursue it or weren't good candidates.
Dr. Burns, last month, former talk show host Wendy Williams, she was in the news. Her caretakers revealed that she has the same dementia diagnosis as Bruce Willis was diagnosed with, frontotemporal degeneration. What is that?
Yeah, so that's a different form of dementia, as Dr. Geiger explained. Dementia is that broad term of just memory and thinking changes, and then there's different types, with Alzheimer's as one, and frontotemporal dementia is another. It's a rarer one, but it's different in that it doesn't affect memory and thinking the way that Alzheimer's does. And what we tend to see with frontotemporal dementia is either behavior changes, personality and behavior changes, or in the case of what it appears Wendy Williams and Bruce Willis, is language changes, progressive language changes. And so what the difference is, if we look under the microscope at what's going on in the brain, we see a different pattern of changes, and we see a different, microscopic change in the brain than we see in Alzheimer's disease.
So we see FTD called a rare form of dementia, and then two household names get diagnosed within a year of each other. Is that just coincidence? Is this really rare, though?
Yeah, I'd say it's coincidence. It is rare. It's not rare if you're studying dementia or working in a memory clinic. We see it regularly. So I think it's probably probably coincidence, and the fact that we're just becoming more and more aware of these diseases, which is a good thing.
Yeah, very good thing. So we know there's things that you can do to improve your brain health, like good sleep, the Mediterranean diet, social connections, exercise. Dr. Geiger, let's bring you back in here. Do we know exactly how exercise benefits the brain?
So we know that aerobic exercise, which is physical activity that is going to increase your heart rate, we know that it improves cognitive function in older individuals, and people that are regular exercisers have lower risk for neurodegeneration. And the beauty of exercise is that it's like a poly pill. It impacts so many different organ systems and tissues in the body. And we know that it has a powerful effect on what we think of as cardiometabolic risk factors, so things like blood pressure, blood glucose regulation, body weight and muscle mass. But then more specifically for the brain, we think that exercise can improve the way the brain utilizes energy in the form of glucose, also the way it produces energy in the form of ATP through cellular processes called mitochondria, and then maybe even more specifically helping to maintain the stability of proteins in the brain, like the amyloid that Dr. Burns just mentioned. And so we don't know exactly the way exercise is working, but we think it's working through many different ways, which is why it's such an exciting area for Alzheimer's disease prevention.
No one's ever said that movement and exercise is a bad thing. It helps in some way. Were you doing some of these things with your mother? Or are these things that she's done through therapy, or just at home with you and your siblings?
I would say it was limited in some capacities, but it has certainly been a motivator for anyone in our orbit to take care of yourself and to keep that forward motion.
So Dr. Geiger and Dr. Burns, you're going to be joining Dr. Stites on Wednesday, the next episode of Show Me the Science, to talk about heat therapy for Alzheimer's. So what is that?
Well, it sounds a little too good to be true, right? But we are working on a new clinical trial with my colleague, Dr. Jill Morris, where we are looking at the benefits of heat therapy in the prevention of Alzheimer's disease, so essentially sitting in a hot tub. But we know that over decades in my own research looking at the benefits of heat and preventing diabetes and obesity, that we can improve those cardiometabolic risk factors with heat. And so lowering blood pressure, improving blood glucose, and now we are looking at a broader clinical trial for individuals that are at risk for Alzheimer's disease due to those metabolic risk factors, because diabetes is a major risk factor for Alzheimer's disease. A lot of people aren't as aware of that, but if we can move the needle on some of these metabolic conditions, we might be able to prevent the brain-associated changes with dementia.
Interesting research. Dr. Burns, the KU Alzheimer's Research Center has a program for the public called My Alliance for Brain Health. If someone wants to join, what can they expect?
Well, it's kind of our method for connecting with people. It's a newsletter, basically, online email newsletter. But what it does is hooks you up with any events, support groups, talks. We do weekly webinars, and then the newsletter itself has things like brain boosters and and it's good to read, and tips in terms of what to do in terms of lifestyle. So it's a great way. We don't overwhelm you with emails either, but we do hopefully give you all kinds of opportunities to learn about brain health and learn about caregiver support programs that we've developed. So yeah, go to that website, search us, KU Alzheimer's Disease Center, and sign up for My Alliance and stay in touch with what we're doing. Research opportunities is one other thing that, we're always looking for volunteers, like heat therapy. So we're always looking for volunteers, and that's a great way to stay connected with what's happening and how things are changing.
What a great resource. Dr. Burns, thanks for sharing that. Be sure to ask your questions. You can use the chat on YouTube or Facebook. You can tweet us or email the Medical News Network. Information is right there on your screen. Let's get a check on our COVID count with Dr. Dana Hawkinson, Medical Director of Infection Prevention and Control. Good morning. Happy Monday.
Hi. Yeah,
Hi.
Happy Monday. It's good. It's good to be back. So.
Yeah, nice to have you in studio.
Yeah.
In the flesh.
It's all right. Olathe's good though. It's really serves a great need and great people down there as well. So right now in the hospital, numbers are really about the same as last week. 12 active COVID infections in the hospital, 1 in the ICU and 1 on the ventilator. But really that number's plateaued, so hopefully next week we can see even lower numbers going down into those single digits as well. So.
All right, Hawk, big change in the new flu vaccines coming this fall. Instead of protecting against 4 strains of the flu, it's only going to protect against 3. So did the COVID pandemic actually kill off an entire strain of the influenza?
Yeah, I don't know if kill off, but I think that's a good word for our viewers and listeners. I think, there were very few silver linings or positives to the pandemic. I think this is one of them. What we have seen now is that this typically in a influenza season and the influenza vaccines, there are 4 strains that are included in those influenza vaccines. It is called a quadrivalent vaccine as opposed to a trivalent vaccine with 3 strains. And those 4 strains are 2 influenza A strains and 2 influenza B strains. So now what they have seen is that really since March 2020, one influenza B strain in particular, the Yamagata strain, has not been identified or isolated since that time in all the samples that they have really been getting in influenza surveillance around the world. So with that knowledge, back in September, there was a recommendation to take that 4th strain out, that influenza B Yamagata strain, out of the vaccines. They're hoping that will help with costs, help reduce any mismatches, and also help improve production times on these vaccines as well. So I think it is a good thing. Obviously, we're going to continue worldwide surveillance. So should another pivot be needed, if there is a development or we find another influenza B strain, we can certainly add that. We also know that there are vaccine companies working on mRNA vaccines for influenza as well. So how will this impact that? We'll just have to wait and see. But overall, I think it is good news. It is, again, one silver lining to the pandemic and the fact that we really haven't detected, and maybe it killed it off, but never say never in the world of microbiology and bacteria and viruses. So we'll wait and see. But right now, this is pretty good news.
All right, Hawk, good.
Yeah.
Good to see you. Thank you so much. Let's get to some questions from our viewers this morning. Ruth Ellen just wants to know if there's any financial help, any resources out there for maybe a spouse when their spouse is diagnosed with Alzheimer's or dementia. Anybody can jump in on that one.
Maybe Jeff might know that one.
Dr. Burns?
Well, I mean, I don't know about direct financial help, but there's programs and resources and talking to a social worker is a great way to get started. So, and I don't know, Mary Catherine, do you have anything you want to add?
I would say that that's completely case-by-case basis, and everyone is, just like the disease itself, it's an individual path that people have to take, and as Dr. Burns said, we field those questions regularly.
Sure, but yeah, it's just another aspect that you have to deal with when you're dealing with a loved one, and it's really a tough time. I want to bring up your mom again, because this is a question that somebody had about just how do you talk with someone who's in denial of their own memory problems? How did you talk with your mom? What were those conversations like? And maybe you could talk to somebody who might be about to have one of those conversations with a loved one.
I think the most important thing in those conversations is dignity of the person. And I think that which is a challenge, and I think that you are balancing both what the reality is, who that person has always been in your life, and what you're hoping for them in the long run. And to the extent that you're able to let them be seen and let them be heard is of greatest importance, and just loving them through that process. And, when you are in those challenging moments, that's when you lean into the people kind of outside that immediate circle, love up and then kind of dump out, with the people that you can lean on, friends, family, social workers.
Love up and dump out.
Yes.
I like that.
Yes.
I like that. We all could use that advice. I might stick with you on this question too. What makes for a good memory care facility? Any green flags or red flags to look out for?
I just think it's important to visit with other people who have been through the same experience. I think it's really important to go and tour the facilities, get to know the people that are there on the day in and day out. We have been so fortunate to foster some wonderful relationships with the aides that take care of mom on a regular basis in between our visits. And in addition to that, it's the nursing staff, it's the front desk people. Those have become some wonderful harbors for us in a lot of the hardship that we've experienced, and the joys, quite frankly. So,
another question, or last question, is I've read that an Alzheimer's blood test used to be on sale, but now it is not. Why the change, Dr. Geiger, Dr. Burns? Do you know? On sale now, it's not.
Yeah, there's a lot happening in the field around blood tests. And there was a company, where I can't remember which company, but they were offering it and kind of advertising it direct to consumers. There still needs to be work to be done, I think, to understand exactly what that means. What a positive blood test, or a test that looks like you may put you at higher risk. And so it was a little premature to start sort of pushing that in public. But I will say, that doesn't mean it's not a really exciting time. We are starting in the next few months to use those blood tests in the clinics here at KU, and it's rolling that out very carefully. So I guess it comes back to specifically that question. I think it comes back to who are we using that blood test on, and if you're marketing it to the population as a whole, it's probably not as effective as, say, using it in patients who are selected because they have memory issues. And so I think the sort of the math around that, the predictive nature of the tests in different populations is what led to the company taking that away from offering it to the public. So, but we will see huge changes in terms of how we diagnose in the coming years based on the use of blood tests.
As we wrap up today, Dr. Burns, I'm going to stay with you. What's the takeaway?
I say, reach out for help if you need it. And I'd say it's a really hopeful time. I've touched on a couple things. We got the new drugs, and I think they're a sign of a lot more to come, a sign of the hope that we have in the field. And then we have the new diagnostics. We have new blood tests that are coming that are really going to change how we detect this disease early and then go after it with the new drugs.
A really exciting time in Alzheimer's research. Dr. Geiger, what's the takeaway?
Yeah, so to piggyback on Mary Catherine's point about these difficult conversations, and also what Jeff just said about having hope, I think also encouraging people to have these diagnoses to test earlier, because we know so much more about prevention now, and that you can live a really high quality life for a longer time with the advent of these new drugs and with prevention like diet and exercise and various things that are available now that weren't just a decade ago.
Thank you so much for your insight today, MC. I want to find out what the takeaway is from your story, and also a quick plug again on your new group, your new Coffee Time group that we're gonna let people know about.
Wonderful, thank you. My takeaway would be proactive versus reactive. Go ahead and have the courage to have the hard conversations with people that you care about and that you love. Not only your family members, but your friends, and brave the conversations. It's okay to let people know if you're having a struggle. It's important to share the joys and the hope, because there's a lot of beauty that can still be found even with this diagnosis.
And where do we find you in the coffee at Price Chopper?
I'll be over in the food court 9 to 10 hanging out with my Starbucks.
Okay,
Come
what day? This is every Wednesday?
Wednesday mornings from 9 to 10.
All right. Thanks so much for doing that.
Thanks.
Appreciate you. Thanks to all of our guests. Thanks to all of our viewers, of course, for being with us today. We'll see you back here tomorrow at 8. Coming up tomorrow on the Morning Medical Update.
Go. Pop, 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 pop. Burst. There you go.
When you train like a pro, you play like a pro. I'm Jessica Lovell on the next Morning Medical Update. Meet a college football player bouncing back from a core muscle injury, the special surgery and the rigorous exercise that has him recovering from an often misunderstood problem. Tuesday at 8.
Thanks, everybody. Subscribe to our Morning Medical Update and Open Mics with Dr. Stites podcast. Now everywhere podcasts are available.